In the vast expanse of the Galactic Federation, where species are ranked by their combat prowess and physical dominance, humans are considered the weakest link. Their frail bodies, short lifespans, and apparent lack of natural weapons have made them the galaxy's laughingstock. But what happens when the universe's greatest underestimation becomes its deadliest mistake? When Ambassador Sarah Chen steps into the combat arena of Zephyria Prime, the alien spectators see nothing more than a fragile pink creature about to be crushed. They don't see the predator that evolution crafted over millions of years. They don't understand that behind those soft brown eyes lies the cunning of Earth's apex species. They're about to learn why humans didn't climb to the top of their food chain through strength alone. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one everyone underestimates. With Trust Teddy, sometimes weakness is just a facade hiding humanity's greatest gift, the ability to turn any disadvantage into a weapon. The galaxy is about to discover what human fighting spirit really means. Ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted her formal diplomatic robes as the shuttle descended through the crimson atmosphere of Zephyria Prime. Through the viewport, she could see the massive crystalline structures that house the Galactic Federation's most prestigious combat academy. Today wasn't supposed to be about fighting. Today was supposed to be about securing humanity's place in the Federation through careful negotiation and cultural exchange. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Approaching the landing platform now, Ambassador," called Captain Martinez from the cockpit. His voice carried the same tension that had plagued the entire crew since they'd received the modified mission parameters 3 days ago. What started as a routine diplomatic visit had transformed into something far more dangerous. Sarah touched the small communication device in her ear. "Status report from Earth Command?" "Still radio silence, ma'am," came the reply from Lieutenant Torres, her aide. "The Federation Council hasn't responded to our protests about the challenge clause." Through her diplomatic training, Sarah had learned to read between the lines of galactic politics. The challenge clause wasn't an accident or a cultural misunderstanding. It was a deliberate trap designed to humiliate humanity in front of the entire Federation. The Zephyrian Empire, along with their allies the Kralix Dominion and the Thorak Republic, had been pushing for months to have humans reclassified from sentient species to protected fauna. The landing was smooth, but Sarah's stomach churned as she saw the welcoming committee. 3 massive Zephyrians stood at attention, their chitinous exoskeletons gleaming in the planet's dual starlight. Each one stood nearly 12 feet tall, with 4 powerful arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Behind them, a crowd of various alien species had gathered, representing dozens of Federation worlds. "Remember," Torres whispered as they prepared to disembark, "according to Zephyrian law, you can refuse the challenge, but it means automatic forfeiture of all diplomatic negotiations." Sarah nodded grimly. 60 years of human diplomatic efforts, all riding on what the aliens saw as a simple combat demonstration. They wanted to prove that humans were too weak to deserve a voice in galactic affairs. The fact that they'd specifically requested a standard diplomatic representative rather than a military officer showed just how confident they were in their assessment. The shuttle doors hissed open, and Sarah stepped onto the crystalline platform. The gravity here was 1.3 times Earth standard, making each step feel heavier, more deliberate. She kept her expression neutral as the lead Zephyrian, whose translator tag identified him as Combat Prime Zethkar, approached. Jethkar's voice rumbled through the translation device, each word dripping with barely concealed contempt. "Welcome to the world where strength determines worth. I trust you understand why you have been brought here." "I understand perfectly, Combat Prime," Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the crowd of alien spectators pressing closer. Some were recording devices, others were simply curious to witness what many expected to be a historic humiliation. Though I should point out that Earth's diplomatic protocols don't typically include trial by combat. A sound that might have been laughter rippled through the crowd. A Thorak representative, whose stone-like skin made him look like a walking boulder, stepped forward. Perhaps that explains why your species remains confined to a single system, he said. In the galaxy, we respect only those who can prove their strength. Sarah took a moment to study the assembled crowd. There were Aquarians, their blue-scaled bodies shimmering with moisture, a delegation of Vorthan insectoid beings with multiple compound eyes. Even a few of the energy-based Luminari had manifested physical forms to witness the event. All of them seemed united in their assessment of human weakness. It was exactly what she'd hoped for. "Very well," she said, removing her diplomatic robes to reveal the simple, form-fitting outfit beneath. "I accept the challenge, under Federation combat laws, with goddamn victory by submission or incapacitation." Zethkar's mandibles clicked together in what Sarah's briefing materials had identified as amusement. "Excellent. Though I feel compelled to warn you, human, that I have been undefeated in over 300 combat trials. My exoskeleton can deflect plasma bolts, and my strength can crush titanium alloy." "Thank you for the warning," Sarah replied politely. "Should we proceed to the arena?" The walk to the combat arena took them through the heart of the Academy complex. Thousands of alien students and faculty lined the corridors, all eager to witness what the galactic news networks were already calling the Great Human Folly. Sarah noticed how they whispered among themselves, pointing at her small frame, her apparent lack of natural weapons, her obvious physical disadvantage. She also noticed how none of them seemed to recognize what she really was. The arena itself was a marvel of Federation engineering. A circular platform 50 meters in diameter, surrounded by energy barriers that could contain even the most destructive combat abilities. The seating area rose in tiers around the central platform, and every seat was filled. Camera drones hovered at various angles, broadcasting the event across the Federation's communication networks. As they reached the arena's edge, Sarah was approached by a medical team carrying what appeared to be emergency healing equipment. "Standard precautionary measures," explained the lead medic, a 6-armed Kondorian. "Though given the species mismatch, we brought our most advanced trauma units." "That's very thoughtful," Sarah said, though she noticed they'd only brought one set of equipment. Apparently, they didn't think Zethkar would need any medical attention. The crowd's noise level rose as both combatants stepped onto the platform. Sarah moved to one side, taking a moment to stretch and test the artificial gravity's effect on her movement. Across from her, Zethkar performed an elaborate series of combat poses, each one designed to display his impressive physical capabilities. His forearms moved in complex patterns, while his powerful legs shifted his weight with surprising grace for such a large being. "Citizens of the Federation," came an amplified voice from the arena's announcement system. "Today we witness a challenge combat under Article 47 of the Federation Charter. Combat Prime Zethkar of the Zephyrian Empire versus Ambassador Sarah Chen of the Human Collective. Victory conditions are submission, incapacitation, or withdrawal from the combat zone." Sarah raised her hand to acknowledge the introduction, drawing a mixture of cheers and what sounded like sympathetic groans from different sections of the crowd. She noticed that the human sections were small but vocal, while the rest of the audience seemed to be treating this more as entertainment than serious combat. "Begin when ready," announced the referee, a neutral Valdorian whose crystalline body could withstand any accidental damage from the combatants. Zethkar immediately charged forward, his forearms spread wide to grab Sarah in what was clearly intended to be a fight-ending hold. His movement was fast and powerful, exactly what Sarah had expected from her research on Zephyrian combat techniques. It was also exactly what she'd been hoping for. Instead of retreating or trying to match his strength, Sarah dropped low and moved forward, sliding under his reaching arms. As she passed beneath him, she drove her elbow upward into a spot just behind his rear left leg joint. The impact seemed insignificant compared to his massive size, but Zethkar stumbled, his charge carrying him past her and into the arena wall. The crowd's noise level dropped noticeably as the Combat Prime turned around, his compound eyes focusing on Sarah with new attention. "Interesting," he said, his translator conveying what might have been respect. "You move faster than expected for such a small creature." "Thank you," Sarah replied, settling into a combat stance that looked nothing like any martial art the Federation databases contained. Her weight was balanced on the balls of her feet, her hands open and relaxed at her sides. To most of the alien observers, she looked completely vulnerable. Zethkar approached more cautiously this time, using 2 arms to probe forward while keeping the other 2 ready to block or grab. Sarah watched his movement patterns, noting how his exoskeleton joints moved, where his balance points were, how his visual system tracked her position. She'd spent 3 months studying Zephyrian anatomy and combat techniques, not because she'd expected to fight one, but because thorough preparation was how humans had survived long enough to reach the stars. When Zethkar struck this time, it was with calculated precision rather than raw power. 2 of his arms swept horizontally at different heights, while the third jabbed straight forward. It was a combination attack that should have been impossible to avoid in the limited space. Sarah's response would have been impossible for most Federation species to even perceive, let alone execute. She twisted her body in a spiral motion that took her between his sweeping arms, grabbed his jabbing arm with both hands, and used his own momentum to throw him across the arena. The silence from the crowd was deafening. Zethkar rolled as he hit the ground, his exoskeleton protecting him from damage, but the surprise was clear in his movements. He'd just been thrown by a creature less than half his size and a fraction of his weight. "How?" he asked as he regained his footing. Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she began to circle him slowly, her movement pattern seemingly random but actually calculated to keep her in his visual blind spots for split seconds at a time. "Your species is very impressive," she said conversationally. "Strong, durable, well-armed. Perfect for the kind of straightforward combat that builds empires." Zethkar launched another attack, this time a spinning motion that brought all 4 arms into place simultaneously. Sarah stepped inside his reach, grabbed his central body segment, and used a leverage technique that sent him crashing into the arena floor with enough force to crack the crystalline surface. "But strength isn't everything," she continued as he struggled to get up. "Sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one you underestimate." The Combat Prime rose more slowly this time, his movements showing signs of disorientation. The impact had been absorbed by his exoskeleton, but the sudden change in orientation had affected his inner ear equivalent. "What are you?" he asked, and for the first time his voice carried something other than confidence. Sarah smiled, and several alien species in the crowd later reported that her expression was more unsettling than any threat display they'd ever witnessed. "I'm human," she said simply. "We're the species that survived ice ages, volcanic winters, asteroid impacts, and predators that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than us. We survived because we learned that every advantage can become a weakness if you know how to exploit it." Zethkar charged again, but this time his movements were desperate rather than controlled. Sarah could see that his confidence was shaken, his technique compromised by confusion and growing fear. She ended the fight with a combination that no Federation combat instructor would have recognized. A joint lock that used Zethkar's own strength against him, followed by a pressure point strike that his own medical databases wouldn't have identified as significant, finished with a leverage throw that left him unconscious on the arena floor. The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds before the crowd exploded into chaos. Shouts, arguments, and demands for explanations filled the air as medical teams rushed to attend to the defeated Combat Prime. Sarah stood in the center of the arena, breathing normally, showing no signs of exhaustion or injury. She looked up at the thousands of alien faces staring down at her, and for the first time since arriving on Zephyria Prime, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. "Now then," she said to the referee, her voice carrying clearly through the arena's amplification system, "I believe we were here to discuss humanity's diplomatic status in the Federation. The crowd's reaction told her everything she needed to know about how successful this first impression had been. But as she looked around at the shocked faces of the galaxy's most powerful species, Sarah Chen knew that the real challenges were just beginning. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had spent millions of years becoming the most dangerous species on Earth, not through strength or natural weapons, but through intelligence, adaptability, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. They were also about to learn that sometimes the best way to win a war was to let your enemy underestimate you until it was far too late. The emergency session of the Federation Council convened 18 hours after Combat Prime Zethkar regained consciousness. Sarah Chen sat in the human delegation's booth, watching as representatives from 47 different species argued about what they'd witnessed on Sephiria Prime. The holographic displays around the council chamber showed the combat footage from multiple angles, slowed down, analyzed, and dissected by the galaxy's finest military strategists. What they saw defied everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. "The speed differential is impossible," declared General Thrax of the Kralix Dominion, his scaled fists pounding the podium. "No carbon-based life form can move that fast without cybernetic enhancement. Scans confirm no artificial augmentation," countered Dr. Svalania, the Aquarian Federation's chief xenobiologist. "The human is operating within baseline parameters for her species." "Then explain how she defeated a combat prime," roared Ambassador Korthak, the Thorak representative whose stone-like features had turned an angry shade of red. "Zethkar has never been beaten in single combat." Sarah watched the proceedings with careful attention, noting which species seemed most disturbed by her victory and which appeared more curious than threatened. The political landscape of the Federation was shifting in real time, and she needed to understand the new dynamics before making her next move. Chancellor Vexstar, the elderly Nexarian who presided over the council, raised one of his 4 hands for silence. His species was known for their diplomatic neutrality and analytical minds, which made his next words particularly significant. "The question before us isn't how the human won," he said, his synthesized voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "The question is what her victory means for the Federation's assessment of human capabilities." A new voice cut through the murmur of agreement. "Perhaps we should ask the human herself." All eyes turned to the speaker, Ambassador Zenthar of the Vorthan Collective. The insectoid being's compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as she gestured toward Sarah's booth with one of her 6 arms. "Ambassador Chen," Chancellor Vexstar said formally, "the Council recognizes you. Please enlighten us about your species' apparent hidden abilities." Sarah stood slowly, activating the translation interface that would carry her words to every species present. She'd spent the last 18 hours preparing for this moment, knowing that her next words could determine humanity's fate in the galactic community. "Honorable Chancellor, respected ambassadors," she began, her tone respectful but confident. "I believe there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what you witnessed yesterday." "Misunderstanding?" General Thrax interrupted. "You defeated one of our finest warriors with techniques that don't appear in any Federation combat database." "Exactly," Sarah replied. "And that's the misunderstanding. You've been evaluating humanity based on your own standards, your own definitions of strength and weakness." She activated a holographic display of her own, showing images of Earth throughout its history. Vast ice sheets covering continents, volcanic eruptions blotting out the sun, massive predators stalking through primeval forests. "My species evolved on a world that tried to kill us for millions of years," she said. "We survived ice ages that should have wiped us out. We endured supervolcanic winters that lasted decades. We were hunted by creatures that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than us." The display shifted to show early humans, small groups huddled around fires, fashioning tools, working together to bring down massive prey animals. "We survived because we learned to think differently. While other species developed natural weapons, we developed our minds. While others grew stronger, we grew smarter. While others became more specialized, we became more adaptable." Ambassador Zenthar leaned forward, her compound eyes focusing intently on Sarah. "Are you saying that what we witnessed was simply normal human capability?" "I'm saying that what you witnessed was the result of 3 million years of evolutionary pressure that taught us to survive against impossible odds," Sarah replied. "But galactic standards assume that strength and size determine the outcome of a fight." She gestured to another holographic display, this one showing human anatomy and physiology. "Humans developed something that most Federation species lack, what we call combat intuition. Our ancestors who couldn't read micro-expressions, predict movement patterns, and exploit weaknesses didn't live long enough to reproduce. What you call martial arts, we call basic survival skills." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Several ambassadors were frantically consulting their own databases, cross-referencing human historical records with their species' own evolutionary paths. Dr. Valania spoke first. "If this is baseline human capability, then our initial assessments were catastrophically incorrect." "Not incorrect," Sarah said carefully. "Incomplete. You evaluated us based on physical strength, natural weapons, and technological development. Those are all valid criteria for measuring a species' potential. But they're not the only criteria." Chancellor Vexter's expression remained neutral, but Sarah caught subtle signs of increased attention in his posture and movement patterns. "What would you consider the appropriate criteria?" he asked. Sarah had been waiting for this question. She activated a new holographic display, this one showing human expansion throughout their solar system. Problem-solving under pressure, adaptability to hostile environments, cooperative behavior in crisis situations, innovation when existing solutions fail. And yes, the ability to defend ourselves when diplomacy isn't an option. "You speak as if these abilities are unique to humanity," observed Ambassador Korthak, though his tone was more thoughtful than hostile now. "Not unique," Sarah corrected, "but concentrated in ways that your initial assessments didn't account for. Most Federation species excelled in one or two areas during their evolution. Humans had to excel in all of them simultaneously, or we would have died out." She gestured to the assembled ambassadors. "The Thorak developed incredible physical resilience. The Zephyrians became master warriors. The Aquarians perfected cooperative social structures. The Kraelix mastered technological innovation. Each of your species became specialists in what you needed to survive." "And humans," prompted Chancellor Vextar. "We became generalists in everything," Sarah said simply, "because our world demanded it." The implications were staggering. If humans were indeed generalist specialists, it meant they could potentially match or exceed other species' capabilities across multiple domains simultaneously. General Thrak stood abruptly. "This is absurd. One combat victory doesn't prove your species is superior to the rest of the galaxy." Sarah smiled, and several ambassadors noted that the expression seemed predatory rather than friendly. "You're absolutely right, General," she said. "One victory proves nothing. That's why I'm prepared to demonstrate human capabilities in any other area the Council considers relevant to Federation membership." The challenge hung in the air like an electric charge. Around the chamber, ambassadors began whispering urgently among themselves. Ambassador Zenthar was the first to respond. "The Vorthan Collective challenges human problem-solving abilities. We present you with a logistics puzzle that has stymied our best minds for cycles." "Accepted," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Dr. Valania raised a graceful hand. "The Aquarian Federation challenges human cooperative abilities. Can your species function effectively in our underwater city environments?" Accepted. More challenges followed in rapid succession: environmental adaptation from the Thorak, technological innovation from the Kraelix, strategic thinking from the Nexarians, cultural sensitivity from the Luminary. Sarah accepted them all, her confidence seemingly unshaken by the mounting list of trials. Chancellor Vexstar raised his hand for silence once more. Ambassador Chen, you realize that failure in any of these challenges will result in humanity's reclassification to protected fauna status? I understand the stakes completely, Chancellor, Sarah replied. But I also understand my species better than you do. We've been preparing for challenges like these our entire evolutionary history. Very well, the Chancellor said. The trials will commence in 72 hours. Each challenge will be observed by neutral Federation monitors and broadcast across the Galactic Communication Network. As the council session ended and ambassadors began filing out, Sarah remained seated, reviewing the list of challenges on her personal display. Each one represented a different aspect of what it meant to be a truly spacefaring civilization. Lieutenant Torres approached her booth as the chamber emptied. Ambassador, are you certain we can handle all of these? Some of these challenges have never been completed by any species. Sarah looked up at her aide, and Torres was surprised to see excitement rather than concern in her expression. That's exactly why I'm confident we'll succeed, she said. These species have been looking for answers within their own specializations, but humans have always excelled at finding solutions that nobody else considered. Over the next 3 days, news of the upcoming trials spread throughout the Federation. Gambling pools opened on dozens of worlds, with odds heavily favoring human failure. Military academies adjusted their curricula to include analysis of unconventional combat techniques. Xenobiologists demanded access to human genetic data to understand how such capabilities had evolved. But in her private quarters aboard the human embassy ship, Sarah Chen was reviewing reports that none of the alien species had access to. Reports from Earth that detailed exactly what humanity had been doing during their 60 years of Federation membership. The galaxy thought humans had been quietly developing their single star system, learning to fit into the existing galactic order. The truth was far more significant. Humans had been studying every Federation species with the same intensity they'd once used to study the predators of ancient Earth. They'd analyzed alien psychology, reverse-engineered alien technology, and developed countermeasures for every potential threat they might face. The Federation was about to learn that 60 years of apparent weakness had been the most successful intelligence-gathering operation in galactic history. Sarah activated her private communication link to Earth Command. This is Ambassador Chen. Initiate Protocol 7. Confirmed, Ambassador. All teams are standing by. Excellent. It's time to show the galaxy what humans are really capable of. As she ended the communication, Sarah looked out her viewport at the stars beyond. Each point of light represented worlds and species that had underestimated humanity for decades. In 72 hours, that would change forever. The galaxy was about to discover that humans had spent their time in the Federation learning every weakness, every limitation, and every blind spot of their potential enemies. They were also about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous predator was the one that looked like prey, until it was too late to escape. The trials would begin soon, and with them, humanity's true introduction to the galactic stage. The first trial took place in the neural computation centers of Vorthan Prime, where Ambassador Zenthar had prepared what she considered an impossible logistics challenge. The massive crystalline structures that housed the planet's quantum computing networks hummed with energy as representatives from across the Federation gathered to witness humanity's first test. Sarah Chen stood before a holographic display that stretched 30 meters across the chamber's central space. The logistics puzzle floating before her was a three-dimensional representation of supply chains, transport routes, and resource distributions across 7 star systems. It was the kind of problem that the Vorthan Collective's best minds had been working on for the equivalent of 3 Earth years. The scenario is as follows, Ambassador Zenthar explained, her compound eyes reflecting the hologram's shifting patterns. 7 systems with different resource production capabilities and varying transportation limitations. The goal is to optimize supply distribution to maximize efficiency across all systems while accounting for unexpected disruptions. Sarah studied the display, noting the complex variables at play. Each system had different gravitational effects on transport vessels, varying production cycles, and unique environmental hazards that could disrupt supply lines. The traditional approach would involve massive computational power to calculate optimal distribution patterns. "What's the current best solution time?" Sarah asked. 47 hours of continuous computation using our most advanced quantum processors, Senthar replied. The Nexarian strategic computers achieved a similar result in 51 hours. I see. Sarah stepped closer to the display, her hands moving through the holographic interface to examine individual supply routes. And what happens when one of these systems suffers an unexpected disruption? The entire optimization must be recalculated from the beginning, admitted Dr. Keksthal, the Vorthan logistics specialist who had designed the challenge. This is why the problem has remained unsolved for so long. Sarah nodded thoughtfully, then did something that surprised everyone present. Instead of beginning complex calculations or requesting access to computing resources, she sat down on the floor in the center of the display and closed her eyes. "What is she doing?" whispered General Thrax to Chancellor Vexstar. "I believe," the Chancellor replied slowly, "she's thinking." For 20 minutes, Sarah remained motionless while the holographic chaos of supply routes and resource flows continued around her. The assembled ambassadors grew increasingly restless, some muttering about human meditation rituals or possible neural breakdown. Then Sarah opened her eyes and stood up. "The problem with your approach," she said conversationally, "is that you're trying to optimize for maximum efficiency in a static system. But these are dynamic systems with unpredictable variables." We reached into the holographic display and began manipulating the supply routes with rapid, precise movements. Instead of creating optimal pathways, she appeared to be building redundant systems with deliberately inefficient backup routes. "What you need isn't perfect optimization," she continued, her hands never stopping their complex dance through the display. "What you need is adaptive resilience." As she worked, the Federation observers began to notice something remarkable. The supply network Sarah was creating looked chaotic and inefficient compared to the traditional optimization models, but they contained something the others lacked: the ability to automatically reroute around disruptions without requiring complete recalculation. "She's building anti-fragile systems, Dr. Valania observed with growing excitement. Networks that actually become stronger when stressed." Within 2 hours, Sarah had restructured the entire 7-system supply chain. When the Vorthan computers ran stress tests on her solution, the results defied their expectations. Not only did the system maintain function when individual components failed, it actually improved efficiency during crisis situations by activating backup routes that were designed to handle increased load. "This is impossible," Dr. Keksthal muttered, staring at the test results. "The mathematics don't support this level of adaptive optimization." "The mathematics are fine," Sarah replied. "You were just asking the wrong question. Instead of, how do we optimize this system, the question should be, how do we build a system that optimizes itself?" Ambassador Zenthar studied the holographic display with all 6 of her arms crossed in what Sarah had learned was a gesture of deep concentration among the Vorthan. "How did you develop this approach?" she asked finally. "Evolutionary biology," Sarah said simply. On Earth, the most successful ecosystems aren't the most efficient ones, they're the most adaptable ones. A forest that can survive fires, droughts, and ice ages is more valuable than a greenhouse that produces perfect crops until the first storm destroys it. The implications rippled through the assembled observers. If humans could apply biological principles to technological problems in ways that hadn't occurred to other species, it suggested cognitive capabilities that went far beyond what the Federation had imagined. The second trial took place 3 days later in the underwater cities of Aquarian Beta, where Dr. Valania had designed a test of cooperative behavior under extreme environmental stress. The challenge required a team to manage a failing underwater habitat while coordinating with alien crew members who communicated through methods completely foreign to human sensory experience. Sarah arrived with a small team of human specialists: Dr. James Okafor, a marine biologist, Captain Lisa Rodriguez, a submarine commander, and Dr. Yuki Tanaka, a xenolinguist. The Aquarians had provided them with basic atmospheric equipment but refused to modify the environment to accommodate human needs. The scenario simulates a critical habitat failure, Dr. Makia Valania explained as they descended through the aquatic city's transport tubes. Your team must work with Aquarian, Kandorian, and Thorax specialists to prevent catastrophic decompression while maintaining life support for 300 residents. The habitat simulation was a marvel of Federation engineering, a complete underwater city section with realistic damage scenarios and genuine consequences for failure. The alien team members were specialists in their fields but had been instructed to use only their species' natural communication methods. This created an immediate problem. Aquarians communicated through bioluminescent patterns that humans couldn't produce. Kandorians used pheromone markers that human noses couldn't detect. Thorax specialists transmitted data through vibrations in solid rock that human bodies couldn't sense. Traditional Federation protocols would involve universal translators and interface technology to bridge the communication gap. But the challenge specifically prohibited such aids, requiring natural cooperation abilities. Sarah's team spent the first 30 minutes of the scenario apparently doing nothing productive. While the alien specialists began their emergency procedures, the humans spread throughout the habitat section, each one positioning themselves near different alien team members. Dr. Okafor stationed himself next to the lead Aquarian engineer and began studying her bioluminescent patterns. Captain Rodriguez found a position where she could observe both the Kandorian damage assessment specialist and the thorax structural engineer. Dr. Tanaka positioned herself at a central communication hub where she could observe all team members simultaneously. Then, something remarkable happened. Dr. Okafor began to mirror the Aquarian's bioluminescent patterns using a handheld light device. Not perfectly, but well enough to convey basic concepts. Captain Rodriguez started tapping on the habitat's metal framework, creating vibration patterns that the thorax engineer recognized as structural status reports. Tanaka began moving through the habitat in specific patterns, her movements coordinated with the team's activities in ways that helped predict and prevent communication breakdowns. "They're learning our languages in real time," observed the Kandorian specialist with amazement. But it was more than language learning. The human team was demonstrating pattern recognition abilities that allowed them to understand not just what their alien colleagues were communicating, but why they were communicating it. They began anticipating needs, coordinating actions, and even improving upon alien suggestions by combining approaches from multiple species. When a critical structural failure threatened to flood the habitat's primary living section, it was Sarah who proposed the solution that saved the scenario. She had noticed that the thorax engineer's vibration patterns contained information about internal stress points that the Aquarian's visual damage assessment had missed, while the Kandorian's pheromone markers indicated atmospheric pressure changes that both other species had overlooked. By synthesizing information from all three alien communication methods, the human team identified a stabilization approach that none of the individual species had considered. The solution required precise coordination between all team members, but the humans had learned enough about their colleagues' communication styles to coordinate the complex multi-species response. The habitat was saved with 17 minutes to spare, and the post-scenario analysis showed cooperation efficiency ratings that exceeded anything previously achieved in multi-species emergency simulations. "Remarkable," Dr. Valania reported to the Federation observers. "The humans didn't just adapt to our communication methods. They improved upon them by finding connections between different sensory modalities that we had never considered." The third trial was scheduled for the following week on Thorac Major, where Ambassador Korthak had designed an environmental adaptation challenge that had never been completed by any Federation species. But before that trial could begin, something unexpected happened. Sarah received a priority communication from the Zephyrian Empire. Combat Prime Zefkar, fully recovered from their arena encounter, had a personal request. Ambassador Chen, his translated voice carried a tone she hadn't heard before. something between respect and curiosity. I would like to understand how you defeated me. Not for revenge or military intelligence, but because your combat methods suggest ways of thinking that my people have never encountered. Combat Prime, Sarah replied formally. I would be honored to discuss human martial philosophy with you. That is not what I'm requesting, Zethkar said. I want you to teach me to fight like a human. The request sent shockwaves through the Federation intelligence services. The Zephyrian Empire's greatest warrior wanted to learn from the species they had dismissed as weaklings only days before, but Sarah saw an opportunity that went far beyond combat training. I'll make you a counter-proposal, Combat Prime. Instead of just teaching you human fighting techniques, let me show you how humans approach any challenge. Combat is just one application of human adaptive thinking. Explain. Come with me to the remaining trials. Observe not just what we do, but how we think about problems. See how the same principles that allowed me to defeat you can be applied to logistics, cooperation, environmental challenges, and any other obstacle we might face. There was a long pause before Zethka replied, You want me to study your species? I want you to understand what it means to think like a human, Sarah corrected. Because once you do, you'll understand why the Federation's assessment of humanity has been so fundamentally wrong. The agreement sent ripples of concern through several Federation governments. The idea of the galaxy's most formidable warrior species learning human strategic thinking was terrifying to those who still saw humans as potential threats. But for Sarah Chen, it represented something far more important than military advantage. It was the beginning of true interspecies understanding, the kind that could transform the entire galactic community. As she prepared for the environmental adaptation trial on Thorak Major, Sarah reflected on what had already been accomplished. The Federation had invited humans to prove they deserved a voice in galactic affairs. Instead, humans were proving that they might understand galactic affairs better than the species who had been running them for millennia. The real trials were just beginning, and the stakes were higher than anyone had imagined. But for the first time since arriving at Zephyria Prime, Sarah Chen was confident that humanity was ready for whatever challenges the galaxy could offer. The environmental adaptation trial on Thorak Major was designed to be impossible. Ambassador Korthak had chosen the planet's most hostile region, the Crimson Wastes, where surface temperatures reached 200 degrees Celsius during the day, dropped to minus 150 at night, and where atmospheric storms contained enough electrical activity to fry most Federation technology. No species has ever completed this trial, Korthak explained as Sarah Chen and her team prepared for transport to the surface. The Thorak people ourselves require our most advanced environmental suits to survive more than a few hours in the wastes. Sarah stood with her team at the edge of the transport platform, studying the hellish landscape below. Dr. Elena Vasquez, her environmental specialist, was taking readings with instruments that seemed absurdly simple compared to the massive life support systems the Thorak used. Captain David Park, her survival expert, was examining local geological samples with nothing more than a field kit and his own enhanced senses. The challenge parameters? Sarah asked. Survive for 72 hours with minimal equipment in a zone where the environmental hazards change continuously, Korthak replied. Establish a base camp that could theoretically support a larger expedition and demonstrate ability to gather local resources without destroying the ecosystem. Behind Sarah, Combat Prime Zethkar observed silently. The massive Zephyrian had insisted on accompanying the trial, claiming scientific interest in human adaptation methods. His presence had made the Thorak nervous, but Chancellor Vexstar had approved the request as part of ongoing Federation research. Standard equipment allowances? Captain Park asked. Basic atmospheric processors, emergency shelter components, and standard survival gear, Korthak listed. The same equipment we provide to all species attempting this trial. Thank you, Sarah said. We won't be needing any of it. The statement caused immediate alarm among the Federation observers. Dr. Volania stepped forward, her aquatic features expressing concern through rapid color changes. Ambassador Chen, This environment will kill unprotected humans within minutes. The atmospheric composition alone will be challenging but manageable, Sarah interrupted gently. Dr. Vasquez has been analyzing the atmospheric data. We believe we can work with what's available. What the Federation observers didn't know was that Dr. Vasquez had spent the last 15 years developing human adaptation protocols for environments that made Torak Major look hospitable. The techniques she'd pioneered were classified as strategic resources by Earth Command, but the current situation had elevated them to necessary diplomatic tools. "This is suicide," General Thrax declared bluntly. "I refuse to be party to the extinction of the human diplomatic team." Sarah turned to face the assembled Federation representatives, and several of them noticed that her expression carried absolute confidence rather than bravado. "General, my species survived ice ages that lasted tens of thousands of years. We adapted to altitude changes that would kill most Federation species instantly. We learned to extract nutrition from environments that contained more toxins than food. This planet is extreme by galactic standards, but it's not the most hostile environment humans have ever conquered." "Prove it," Korthak challenged. "Gladly." The descent to the surface took place during the planet's brief twilight period, when temperatures were merely uncomfortable rather than immediately lethal. As soon as the transport landed, Sarah's team began moving with practiced efficiency. Dr. Vasquez immediately began collecting atmospheric samples, but not for analysis. She was gathering trace compounds that human biochemistry could process in ways that alien physiology couldn't. Captain Park started excavating what looked like a simple depression in the rocky surface, but his movements suggested he was following some predetermined plan. Sarah herself began walking in expanding circles around the landing site, apparently collecting random mineral samples but actually conducting a comprehensive environmental assessment using techniques that required no instruments beyond human sensory capabilities. "What are they doing?" Ambassador Zenthar asked through the observation feed. "They're reading the environment," Zethkar replied thoughtfully. "Not measuring it or analyzing it, reading it." The observation proved accurate. Within 2 hours, Sarah's team had established a base camp that looked nothing like standard Federation protocols, but everything like proven human survival architecture. They had identified wind patterns that would provide natural temperature regulation, located subsurface water sources using nothing but geological observation, and begun extracting atmospheric gases that their modified breathing apparatus could process into breathable air. But the real demonstration began when Thorak Major's day cycle started. As the twin suns rose and surface temperatures began climbing toward lethal levels, Sarah's team didn't retreat to protective shelters. Instead, they adapted their activity patterns to work with the environment rather than against it. Dr. Vasquez had identified mineral formations that absorbed heat during the day and released it at night, creating natural thermal regulation zones. Captain Park had excavated a network of caves that channeled the planet's electrical storm energy into useful power sources. Sarah had mapped subsurface movement patterns that allowed rapid travel between different environmental zones. "Impossible," breathed Dr. Kexthal, the Vorthan observer. "They're thriving in conditions that should have killed them hours ago." But thriving was exactly what they were doing. By the second day, the human team had not only survived, but had begun improving the environment around their base camp. They had established water collection systems that were more efficient than Thorak engineering. They had created shelter networks that provided better protection than Federation environmental suits. They had even begun cultivating local plant life in ways that enhanced rather than depleted the ecosystem. "How?" Korthak demanded during a communication check. "Our instruments show surface temperatures that should denature your proteins." "Temperature is relative," Sarah replied, her voice calm despite the extreme conditions. "We're not fighting the environment. We're becoming part of it." The explanation would have sounded mystical if not for the concrete results. The human team was demonstrating adaptation capabilities that redefined what the Federation considered possible for carbon-based life. But the real revelation came on the third day, when Thoric Major's most dangerous environmental hazard manifested, a geological storm that combined seismic activity with electromagnetic chaos and atmospheric upheaval. It was the kind of event that forced even the Thoric themselves to evacuate. Sarah's team didn't evacuate. They surfed the storm. Using techniques that combined geological prediction, electromagnetic navigation, and atmospheric dynamics, the humans rode the planetary chaos like ancient seafarers riding ocean swells. They used seismic waves for rapid transportation, electromagnetic pulses for communication across vast distances, and atmospheric pressure changes for power generation. "They're not just surviving the storm," reported the Nexarian Geological Observer in amazement. "They're using it as a transportation and communication network." When the 72-hour trial period ended, Sarah's team had accomplished something unprecedented in Federation history. They had not only survived Thoric Major's most hostile environment, but had established a base camp that was more sustainable and more comfortable than most Federation colonies. The victory should have been cause for celebration, but Sarah noticed troubling signs among the Federation observers. Private communications were increasing. Military representatives were requesting detailed recordings of everything the humans had demonstrated. Several ambassadors were conspicuously absent from the post-trial debriefings. Ambassador Chen, Chancellor Vextar said privately after the official ceremonies had concluded, "We need to discuss the implications of what your species has demonstrated." "Certainly, Chancellor. What specific implications concern you?" "All of them," he replied grimly. "Your people have shown capabilities that redefine our understanding of biological possibility. The Federation Council is unsettled." Sarah had been expecting this conversation. The trials had been designed to test human worthiness for Federation membership, but they had instead revealed human capabilities that made other species nervous. "Chancellor, we've done exactly what the Council requested. We've demonstrated that humans can contribute meaningfully to the galactic community. You've demonstrated that humans can exceed other species' capabilities across multiple critical domains," Vextar corrected. "That's a very different thing." The distinction was crucial. The Federation operated on principles of balanced power between species with complementary strengths. The idea of one species potentially superior to all others in multiple areas threatened the entire galactic political structure. "Are you saying that competence is grounds for exclusion from the Federation?" Sarah asked carefully. "I'm saying that the Council is reconsidering whether the trials were a wise idea," Vextar replied. "Some members are beginning to view human capabilities as a potential threat rather than a potential asset." That evening, Sarah received an urgent communication from Earth Command that confirmed her worst fears. Federation intelligence services had begun conducting covert assessments of human colonies and installations. Military units from several species were being positioned near human space for training exercises. Most ominously, certain Federation members were calling for preemptive action to contain what they termed the human expansion threat. "The irony is perfect," Sarah said to Combat Prime Zethkar, who had requested a private meeting. "We've proven we deserve to join the Federation by demonstrating capabilities that make the Federation want to destroy us." "Not all of the Federation," Zethkar replied. "The Zephyrian Empire has been analyzing what we've observed. We believe your species represents an evolutionary advancement that could benefit the entire galaxy. And how do you think the rest of the galaxy will react to that assessment?" "With fear," the Combat Prime admitted. "Fear often leads to violence." Sarah nodded grimly. She had hoped that demonstrating human capabilities would lead to acceptance and cooperation. Instead, it appeared to be leading toward conflict on a galactic scale. "Combat Prime, I need to ask you something important. If the Federation decides that humanity is too dangerous to exist, will the Zephyrian Empire stand with us?" Zethkar was silent for a long moment, his massive form still in the chamber's artificial gravity. "Ambassador," he finally said, "after studying your species for the past weeks, I believe that question is irrelevant. Why? Because if the Federation decides to eliminate humanity, I don't think they'll succeed. And that realization is what terrifies them most. As Sarah prepared for the final trial, she understood that the real test was no longer about proving human worthiness for Federation membership. It was about preventing a galactic war that could destroy everything the Federation had built. The galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous moment comes not when you're underestimated, but when your true capabilities are finally understood. The final trial was supposed to be a test of cultural sensitivity on the pristine world of Luminar Alpha, where the energy-based Luminari had prepared challenges involving interaction with their most sacred traditions. Instead, Sarah Chen found herself in an emergency session of the Federation Council, facing accusations that would determine not just humanity's membership status, but whether her species would survive the next standard year. "The evidence is undeniable," declared General Thrax, his scaled features flushed with agitation as he gestured toward the holographic displays surrounding the council chamber. Humanity has been conducting systematic intelligence-gathering operations throughout their entire Federation membership period. The displays show detailed analysis of every human interaction with alien technology, every cultural exchange program. What the Federation had interpreted as eager participation in galactic community had actually been comprehensive data collection on an unprecedented scale. 60 years of spying, added Ambassador Korthak, his stone-like features somehow conveying both anger and grudging respect. "They've mapped our weaknesses, studied our technologies, and prepared countermeasures for every Federation species." Sarah stood in the center of the chamber, no longer in the dock as a petitioner for membership, but as a defendant in what amounted to a trial for species survival. Around her, the representatives of 47 worlds waited for her response to charges that could justify military action against Earth and all human colonies. "Honored Council," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "These accusations are accurate." The admission sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. Several ambassadors began speaking at once before Chancellor Vexstar restored order. "You admit to conducting espionage operations against Federation members?" the Chancellor asked. "I admit to something far more significant than espionage," Sarah replied. "I admit that my species has been preparing for this exact moment from the day we were granted Federation membership." "This moment?" Dr. Valania inquired, her bioluminescent patterns showing confusion and concern. "The moment when the galaxy would have to decide whether humanity deserves to exist?" Sarah activated her own holographic display, showing images of human colonies, research stations, and military installations throughout their star system. "Honorable delegates, you've been thinking about this situation incorrectly. You see evidence of spying and assume hostile intent. But intelligence gathering isn't preparation for aggression. It's preparation for survival." "Survival against what?" demanded General Thrax. "Against the galaxy's reaction to discovering what humans really are." The chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Sarah continued before anyone could respond. "My species has been in this situation before. Throughout our history, whenever one group of humans encountered another with superior technology or greater numbers, conflict was often inevitable. The stronger group would attempt to eliminate or subjugate the weaker one." She gestured to the displays showing Federation military capabilities. "When we joined the Federation, we were the weaker group. So we did what humans have always done in that situation. We learned everything we could about our potential enemies, while appearing as harmless as possible." "Potential enemies?" Ambassador Zenthar's compound eyes focused intently on Sarah. "We welcomed humanity into the galactic community." "You welcomed what you thought humanity was?" Sarah corrected. "A weak species that could be safely patronized and controlled. But what happens when weak species prove to be strong? What happens when protected fauna reveals itself to be apex predators?" Combat Prime Zefkar stepped forward, his massive form drawing attention from across the chamber. "The ambassador speaks truth. I have been studying human behavior for the past weeks. Their intelligence gathering was not preparation for conquest. It was preparation for the war they knew would come when their true nature was revealed. War? Chancellor Vextar's neutral expression shifted toward concern. Ambassador Chen, is humanity preparing for military action against the Federation? Sarah smiled, and several delegates later reported that her expression was more terrifying than any threat display they had ever witnessed. Chancellor, that's the wrong question. The right question is whether the Federation is prepared for military action against humanity. Explain. Let me tell you what 60 years of careful observation has taught us about the galactic community, Sarah said, her tone shifting to something that sounded like a university lecture but felt like a predator explaining its hunting strategy. The Kralix Dominion has superior manufacturing capabilities, but their supply lines are vulnerable to disruption at 17 critical choke points. The Thorak Republic has impressive defensive capabilities, but their military doctrine hasn't evolved significantly in 3,000 years. The Zephyrian Empire has the finest warriors in the galaxy, but their strategic thinking relies on direct confrontation rather than asymmetric tactics. As she spoke, her displays showed detailed analysis of each species' military capabilities. The Aquarian Federation excels at cooperative defense, but their unity becomes a weakness when coordination networks are compromised. The Vorthan Collective has processing power that dwarfs human computers, but they're vulnerable to the kind of chaotic variables that humans specialize in exploiting. This is a threat assessment, General Thrax said with growing alarm. You're outlining how to defeat the entire Federation. I'm outlining how my species would survive if the Federation decided we were too dangerous to exist, Sarah corrected, because that's what humans do. We don't plan for victory. We plan for survival against impossible odds. Ambassador Zenthar stepped forward, her multiple limbs gesturing in what Sarah recognized as a formal challenge pose. Are you saying that humanity could defeat the combined might of the Federation? I'm saying that humanity could survive the combined might of the Federation long enough to make everyone regret the decision to attack us, Sarah replied. And in the long term, survival is the only victory that matters. The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates began arguing among themselves. Military representatives demanded immediate action, and several ambassadors attempted to leave the chamber simultaneously. Chancellor Vextar called for order, but it took several minutes for the noise level to drop enough for conversation to resume. Ambassador Chen, the Chancellor said formally, the Council needs to understand your species' intentions. Are you threatening the Federation? Chancellor, Sarah replied, her voice carrying absolute sincerity. I'm trying to save it. Explain. Everything I've told you about human capabilities and preparations is true, but what I haven't told you is why we've been so careful to gather this intelligence while demonstrating our peaceful intentions for 60 years. Sarah's expression shifted, and for the first time since the trials began, she looked genuinely vulnerable rather than confidently predatory. Because we don't want to be alone in the galaxy. The simple statement carried more weight than any threat or demonstration of capability. My species spent millions of years as the only intelligent life on our world. We survived by becoming the most dangerous predators in our planet's history, but survival isn't the same thing as living. When we reached the stars and discovered the Federation, we found something we'd never had before. Peers. She gestured to the assembled delegates. Honorable ambassadors, you represent species with capabilities that complement and exceed human abilities in dozens of ways. You've created a galactic civilization that has lasted for millennia. You've achieved cooperation and peace on a scale that humans had never imagined possible. And yet you prepared for war against us, Dr. Villani observed. We prepared for the possibility of war because we understand the psychology of fear, Sarah replied. We know that discovering a potential threat often triggers preemptive action, even among peaceful species. So we gathered intelligence not to plan aggression, but to ensure that any attempt to eliminate humanity would be so costly that cooler heads would prevail. Deterrence, Combat Prime Zethkar said with obvious respect. Strategic deterrence through demonstrated capability. Exactly. We wanted to join your galactic community, but we needed to ensure that fear of human capabilities wouldn't destroy that community through preventive war. Chancellor Vextar leaned back in his chair, his forearms gesturing in what Sarah recognized as deep contemplation. So the intelligence gathering, the hidden capabilities, the careful demonstration of strength, all of this was intended to prevent conflict rather than enable it? All of this was intended to make it clear that the cost of destroying humanity would exceed any benefit of eliminating a potential threat, Sarah confirmed. We wanted you to understand that we could be dangerous enemies, so that you would choose to make us valuable allies instead. The logic was sound, but the implications were staggering. The Federation was being confronted with a species that had spent decades orchestrating one of the most sophisticated diplomatic strategies in galactic history. There's one thing I don't understand, Ambassador Zenthar said slowly. If this was all preparation for survival, why reveal your capabilities now? Why not continue the deception indefinitely? Sarah looked directly at the Vorthan ambassador, and her expression carried something that might have been regret. Because someone noticed the pattern of human activities and prepared this challenge scenario specifically to expose our capabilities. The trials weren't a test of our worthiness for Federation membership. They were designed to reveal what we'd been hiding so that the Federation could decide whether to destroy us while they still believed it was possible. The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the situation became clear. The trials had been a trap, designed to expose human capabilities so that preemptive action could be taken if necessary. But the trap had revealed not just human strength, but human strategic thinking on a level that redefined what the Federation considered possible. So what happens now? Chancellor Vextar asked. Sarah Chen, Ambassador of Earth, stood in the center of the chamber and made the most important decision in human history. Now we find out whether the galaxy is wise enough to choose cooperation over conflict. Because for the first time since we joined the Federation, you know what we really are. And for the first time in millions of years, humans have found something worth more than survival. Which is a future where we're not alone in the universe. The vote that followed would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future of galactic civilization itself. Because the Federation had to decide whether to risk war with a species that had spent decades preparing for exactly that possibility, or to embrace the dangerous partnership that might transform them all. In the end, it wasn't fear that decided the outcome. It was curiosity about what humans and aliens might accomplish together that no species had achieved alone. The galaxy was about to discover that sometimes the most dangerous species makes the most valuable ally, and that evolution's greatest gift isn't strength or intelligence, but the wisdom to know when cooperation serves survival better than conflict. Sarah Chen had come to prove humanity deserved a place in the galaxy. Instead, she had proven that the galaxy needed humanity to reach its true potential. The trials were over. The real test was just beginning. Weakness is just a facade. She's a naturally gifted fighter. HFY Stories. HFY Sci-Fi.